Hello everyone, I'm Colin Canet. Today I've got another small batch of things not to do in the workshop, so let's have a look. Here's something you might take you a minute to figure out what it is. When I first saw the picture, it took me a few minutes to figure out. Somebody sent me pictures, said, here's a hack you probably don't want to use. And I looked at it and I said, no, that's perfect. That's exactly what not to do. This is where somebody had connected from their main power source to one of their woodworking machines, and they didn't have any proper connectors. And they ended up using these zip ties. I just can't imagine. I've replicated it here to show it to you because the picture was so poor I couldn't show it. But what a bad idea on so many levels. It's dangerous, easily shorted out. I just can't imagine something, I guess. Never do something like this. If you're connecting electrical components together, make sure you know what you're doing and use the proper connections. When you've just come back from the lumber store and you've picked up a batch of lumber, it's pretty tempting to go right to the table saw and start ripping that wood to width. But that's where it can get very dangerous. Let me show you. When you first look at this board, it looks pretty straight and flat. But when you put it up against a fence, look at the gap that there is there. Let me show you a different angle. So there's that bowing that I'm showing you. So when we start down here, see how it's nice and tight up against the fence? But as we start moving along, you'll notice a gap starting to grow in there. And that's some spring. Now, if you could push hard enough against that, you might be able to straighten that out, but you would never want to do that. You'd want to start off with this being naturally flat. See how that gap is growing and growing? Now look at what happens if you try and cut that wood. So what starts to happen when you start pushing, it's fine right to here because it's supported at the front of the fence and at the back. But as you push beyond, now it's starting to jam in the blade. And the reason it's starting to jam in the blade is now this wood that was up against here is now curving down. It's on the other side. It's on the back side. And the more that you push it, the more it starts jamming against the blade. If it was a big, thick board, you could get, and a powerful saw, you could get this wood kicking back at you. It gets very dangerous because now you're really jamming that wood in there. So whenever you're cutting wood, make sure that it's absolutely flat against the fence. It's imperative that it's flat against the fence or you won't get a good cut and it becomes dangerous. At a woodworking course I attended many years ago, one of the other students suggested using, for example, 3/4 inch plywood as a critical way of measuring distance. And the instructor said, no, that's not a good idea, and here's why. The Plywood Manufacturers Association, which everybody who makes plywood belongs to this, when they make plywood, they always make it a tiny bit narrower than the designated size. For example, if you're making 3/4 inch plywood, it always wants to be slightly less than that 3/4 of an inch. And I have got some good quality double-sided oak plywood here. You can tell it's good quality because it has a lot of plies in it. That's one of the things that you look for. And when I look at that, it's 32nd of an inch shy of 3/4 of an inch. And that's where it should be. It wants to be less than the 3/4 of an inch. And here's another little piece of 1/2 inch. Again, lots of plies, good quality Baltic birch. And it's at least a 64th of an inch shy. So the better quality plywood will be a little bit more accurate. Construction grade can be off by a fair bit, but you never ever want to use it for critical measuring because it's just not that accurate. And here's another bad idea. In this case, we have a hacksaw blade that's been screwed to the side of the workbench, and of course the purpose of that is so that you can put your sandpaper sheets in there and you can tear them off at whatever length and size you want. Now the idea of having it in this location is the idea that's bad. Using the hacksaw is not a bad idea. In fact, I do the same thing. I have it in a sheet like this. I even have it marked so that I know where the 1/2 sheet and 1/4 sheet. Put it in, set it up to the line, and and that's it. It's that easy. But look, it's portable. I can put this thing anywhere. The problem with it on the side of the bench like this, especially with the teeth up like this, you're going to drag your clothes as you're working on your bench across it. But where it gets really dangerous is if you're using power tools with cords and you're running those back and forth across there. That could be a really dangerous idea. So probably not the best idea, that one. I'm over at the router table right now, and if you've got a router table, you know that the direction of the bit is going to be in that direction, and because we always push into the direction of the bit, we always feed the wood from right to left, and the cutter comes around and cuts our wood in that manner. But you may have had an idea at some point that you could actually do by jamming the wood in there. You might actually be able to make a mini jointer, or actually a mini planer. But what happens in a situation like this is, look at the condition of the blade is not changing. It's still going in this direction. So that means when you get to here, now it's going back like that. So if you push that wood in like that on the router table, what's going to happen is in the blink of an eye, it's going to grab that wood, and if you're not paying attention, it might even draw your fingers into it, and it will wing that wood right across there in the blink of an eye. So it's a really bad idea to be pinching wood between the fence and the router bit. Now, there's something that I've never done, I probably never will. If you were ever to do that, you would have to feed the wood in from this side. And in this case, you can see that the bearing is actually you'd probably have to remove that bearing. The wood is too high here. There's all sorts of complications with doing this. And one of the big complications is all the wood and chips that are going to get thrown out. But if you were going to do that, you would have to feed in from this side so that now you're feeding into the bit on that side. But altogether, it's probably a bad idea. Well, that concludes my video for today. And you know, I do these kinds of videos just to make you more aware of some of the things that can go wrong in the blink of an eye in the workshop, and hopefully save some injuries. I'm Colin Cadet for WoodWorkWeb. Thanks for watching.